Professor Peggy Valcke. The title is Accountable, Not Liable, is regulating video sharing platforms under the new AVMS directive, a slippery slope towards internet censorship. Good question. One of the major changes in our information society is that an unlimited usage of many kinds of very popular applications as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and so many others. These are very easy accessible for individuals, companies, associations, politicians, parties, political parties, and so on. And as we know, those platforms are so important that this usage is influencing so very much our daily life. And of course, these media are also abused by hacking, distributing illegal content, fake news, where have we heard that? And so on. So some regulation will be necessary, and one of the issues is the responsibility of the platform owner. In the next presentation, Peggy will tackle the regulation of video sharing platforms as described by the Audiovisual Media Services Directive of the European Union. Peggy is research professor ICT and media law at the University of Leuven and visiting professor at the University of Tilburg. She also was part-time professor at the University in Florence and the Central European University in Budapest. She is member of the management board of the Leuven Center of IT and Intellectual Property Law, active in many other organizations. I just mentioned that she is also assessor of the Belgian Competition Authority and member of the General Chamber of the Flemish Media Regulator. Peggy is also a colleague, board member of FITCE Belgium. Peggy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to be here again at a FITCE conference, because 12 years ago I spoke at the FITCE conference in Athens, 2006, about delivering content services under the new European framework for audiovisual media, fair play or unfair competition. It was the time in which the audiovisual regulation at the EU level was being revised, adopting a new directive which would rename the existing directive, the Television Without Frontiers Directive, which had been the cornerstone for audiovisual regulation in the European Union since 1989, and which has been amended in 1997 and then a second time in 2007, and at that time it was renamed Audiovisual Media Services Directive in order to show how the scope had been expanded in 2007 from traditional linear broadcasting to include also newer on-demand video offerings via digital television platforms and via the internet. So since 2007, we have had the Audiovisual Media Services Directive as the EU legislative instrument, a directive, that's an EU legislative instrument to harmonize the rules at member state level for the audiovisual sector, the broadcasting sector in Europe. Now, harmonization comes with a certain objective. It is to create the so-called single market. So the underlying idea here is to enable the free flow of television services, and since 2007 we call them audiovisual media services throughout the European Union. Which means that if audiovisual services from member state A, let's say France, are also being received and watched in other member states, Germany, the Netherlands, you name it, they cannot be blocked for reasons of national law. Since the rules have been harmonized, all those rules have then been transposed at national law by the member states, are being watched over by media regulators like Ofcom here in the UK. So member states have to trust that audiovisual services established in other member states respect certain quality norms. And so this directive harmonizes those rules in a number of areas, like cultural diversity, protection of minors, human dignity, commercial communications, product placement, advertising, sponsorship, etc. Now, since 2007, a lot has changed in the media landscape. It has been pointed out today and yesterday that we watch more and more on the move, via the internet, short clips. We've heard figures before. These are figures from a European Commission memo. But what is especially becoming popular, or has become especially popular in the last 10 years, are the video platforms, the video sharing platforms, of which you see 3 well-known or the most known examples here, YouTube, Vimeo, Dailymotion. But also social networks, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram are adding more and more video facilities to their apps. And we also see new networks, social networks arising based on video, live streaming, like Periscope, which has been acquired by Twitter, Live.me, which is a Chinese-made app for live video streaming, Twitch, which has been named before today, which focuses on video gaming. So you watch others playing video games live, and also broadcasts of esports competitions. And Bigo Live is another very popular live video streaming network. Yesterday we saw some figures from Ofcom already, and also this morning, and I also included some in my presentation. So what can we learn from these figures? If we look at the proportion of time spent watching for the overall population, so all those age 6+, you might think, short online video clips, they only amount to 4%. That's not so spectacular. However, if we watch at the younger ages, between 6 and 15, we see that the percentage of, or the proportion of time spent watching on short online video clips is much more significant, and it's 20%. So the youngsters go massively to these video sharing platforms and consume these short video clips. What this also triggers is, there's an alert here. Apparently we have been sitting down for more than an hour already, so it's time to stand up. May I invite you all, please, to stand up just for a second, and perhaps we can move a little bit. Maybe we can all do our arms like this to the right, and then you move them backwards, and you move your hips forward, you move your arms back, put them to the left, and you do the same. Yeah, and then after some time you can do this a bit quicker. You can sit down again. Does anyone know which dance you have just been performing? The Floss. Yes, indeed. So, radio killed video killed the radio star, internet killed the video star. So we see new stars popping up that our kids know, and we are hardly aware of them. This is the inventor of the Floss dance. Anyone knows his name or how he's called? No, he's known as the Backpack Kid. So he posted a video of him doing this dance, and it went viral. And he even was invited by Katy Perry on the Saturday Night Live show, and that gave him world fame. Now, anyone recognizing this face? Swedish guy, Felix Kjellberg, but better known as Pewdiepie. One of the most popular vloggers nowadays, making millions actually with his videos. In 2016, he earned $15 million through his videos that he is showing on YouTube. So if we look at the most popular YouTube channels, in June 2018, we see Pewdiepie on the top, but also Justin Bieber, a well-known singer, Ed Sheeran, so Taylor Swift. They are artists who are active in the music sector, but we also see names like Pewdiepie. He's not a singer, he's not an actor, he just became famous through his videos that he is sharing online. Now this can be very funny, and our kids like it, but at the same time we see the rise of what we can call undesirable or at least controversial content. ISIS is using these video sharing platforms to distribute beheading videos. We see racist speech and fake news proliferating on social networks. We see real-time suicide videos popping up, or videos promoting anorexia, pro-ana information. We see that these social video networks are being used also by people with bad intentions, people who groom children or who want to abuse children. And even the famous Pewdiepie. He got in a storm of media attention not so long ago for a video where he had invited other people to show a banner, Death to Jews. After which he claimed it was just a joke, but he was accused of distributing anti-Semitist and information, and he's also apparently regularly showing Nazi imagery in some of his videos. Now, whereas though we regularly read in the newspapers about traditional broadcasters or on-demand providers like MTV or Playboy being fined by the media regulator, here in this case Ofcom, for airing, for broadcasting gross language, like in the case of MTV. There was an artist who had used the term, apologies in advance, motherfucker or fucking wanker. Or in the case of Playboy, they had been showing pornographic material which was insufficiently, where minors could easily get access to, and so they didn't sufficiently protect minors from having access to that content, so they got huge fines. Now what happened with PewDiePie when showing anti-Semitist or Nazi material? He didn't get a fine from Ofcom, nor did YouTube. While some of his good lucrative deals with Disney's Maker Studios and also with YouTube, he lost those deals, but he could just continue his videos and he wasn't sanctioned by any media regulator. Why is that? Well, we need to find the answer in the law. The AVMS Directive, as it has been adopted in 2007 at the EU level and then subsequently transposed in national law, covers a subset of audiovisual media service, namely those who are offered or that are offered commercially for the general public as a program that is sufficiently TV-like, and that falls under the editorial responsibility of a media service provider, meaning that the provider controls the selection and the organization of the programs. And territorial, speaking from a territorial perspective, the media service provider has to be established in an EU member state. So the central administration, the headquarters, and the programming decisions have to be taken here in the EU in order to fall within the scope of the directive and hence the rules that have been harmonized through that directive. So what does that mean in practice? It means that an on-demand video provider like Netflix does fall within the scope of the directive. However, a video sharing platform like YouTube does not. Why not? Well, YouTube claims it doesn't have editorial responsibility for the user-generated videos. It does not actively select those videos. It just offers a platform where others can share those videos. And then you're going to ask me, hey, what about those uploading the videos? Well, in a lot of cases, this is just for fun. People don't make money with that. In recent years, we see people making a lot of money with it, like PewDiePie, earning 15 million a year. So don't they qualify then as an audiovisual media service provider? Well, then their argument is, this is not TV-like, right? It's just short clips. It's not something you saw on traditional television. Do media regulators buy that argument? Well, yes, they do. Even with short video clips coming from professional companies like the BBC, if they offer those as short clips on YouTube, this is a famous case, the Top Gear YouTube channel case here in the UK, Ofcom ruled, oh, that's not TV, it's not an on-demand program service, it's just short clips, it's not sufficiently TV-like. Ofcom, in this case, overruled ADVOD, the co-regulatory body that existed at that time, to monitor and regulate the on-demand services, but which has stopped its activities since the 1st of January 2016. Ofcom has now taken over that regulatory power entirely. Now, there are media regulators in other member states who see things differently. And the French CSA, Conseil Supérieur de l'Audiovisuel, being a good example, they are much more keen than Ofcom to regulate content on these video sharing platforms. And last year they have actually imposed a warning, so not a fine, but they have issued a warning against a professionally made series of short cooking videos. Les recettes pompettes by Poulpe was the name of the series. So it got a warning for not respecting rules with regard to commercial communication. So there is a slight nuance, but in general, video sharing platforms like YouTube, Dailymotion, and the users that upload content do not fall currently within the scope of the rules in the directive. Where does that leave them? Well, legally speaking, they are information society services, these video sharing platforms, for which the e-commerce directive is the leading instrument. And in the e-commerce directive, which was adopted in 2000, we find the so-called safe harbor provisions, which shield those, as they call themselves, intermediaries from being held liable for content that is shared through their networks, their platforms, etc. And so these safe harbor provisions are laid down in 3 articles, Article 12, 13, and 14, of which Article 14 is the most relevant, dealing with hosting providers. So YouTube and YouTube-like platforms have always claimed to be these hosting providers. And here there's this EU instrument saying they cannot be held liable for information stored at the request of the user of the service, on the condition basically that they are not aware that there's illegal content on their platform. And as soon as they become aware, they act expeditiously. But there is no duty to monitor. There's rather, to the contrary, according to Article 15, there is this prohibition, or member states are not even allowed to impose on these intermediaries a duty to monitor constantly the content on their platform. Why not? Well, you have to realize this was adopted in 2000, when legislators were keen on opening or fostering innovation, and they were afraid that by imposing too much liability on these intermediaries, this would hinder innovation and this would result in massive private censorship, intermediaries taking down content in order not to be held liable. This would hinder the free flow of information. So at that time, the EU legislator laid down this prohibition for member states to impose general monitoring obligations on ISPs, hosting providers, etc. And this has been confirmed by the Court of Justice in famous cases where collecting societies, copyright collecting societies, SABAM in these 2 cases, try to force ISPs like Scarlet or social networks like Netlog to monitor what was happening on their services, and where the court said, sorry, this would not respect fundamental rights of free expression and etc. And referring also to Article 15 of the e-commerce directive. However, times are changing. Online video platforms are more and more under pressure to curate the internet, as we call it, and to become the police of the internet. There's pressure from users flagging inappropriate content. There's pressure from advertisers. You may remember that in 2017, March 2017, Google was confronted with major brands taking away their advertising revenues after they had discovered that their ads were shown next to inappropriate content, racist content, extremist videos, etc. So, well, Google reacted. They felt financially, or there were financial effects. And also because of recent legal developments. That's a third reason why platforms are more eager to take action to make sure that platforms are not full with racist or other illegal and inappropriate content. What are these legal developments? Well, I've structured them here at 3 levels. We see courts, leading courts. So there's the European Court of Human Rights, there's the Court of Justice of the EU, who have dealt with a number of cases where they came to the conclusion that platforms in certain circumstances had to act and were responsible for taking down content, filtering content, etc. That is the famous Delphi case, where a big news portal was held liable for not taking down offensive comments that the European Court considered to amount to hate speech, so clearly illegal speech. Now, in later cases, like the Hungarian case and the Swedish case, the European Court has nuanced this a bit, saying, well, it only applies to large, professionally run news portals that post content themselves and trigger comments, and they allowed, Delphi in this case allowed anonymous comments, so there was no other way for the victim to get a remedy than to turn to the platform. But in later cases, the court has said, well, this doesn't apply to smaller platforms or not-for-profit blogs through which defamatory speech has been distributed. In cases like Google France, Telecommunications, etc., the Court of Justice of the EU has also set standards for what is a diligent economic operator. What should you do if you operate such a platform? You can't just say, this is a platform and everybody can just do whatever they want and pull your hands completely off it. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to act like a diligent economic operator, the court said in eBay. So you have a certain duty. Or in Telecommunications, the court upheld injunctions against ISPs to cooperate with law enforcement or to act in order to stop copyright infringements. We've also seen in the last year, only in the last year, the European Commission coming up with a range of non-binding policy documents, what we label as soft law, recommending internet platforms to take certain actions, to put up filtering systems, recommending, not obliging, recommending. Work with trusted flaggers, make sure you have appropriate notice and takedown systems in place, etc. And there is also recently a wave of legislative initiatives, or binding initiatives, imposing duties on platforms to take down certain content. The German NetzDG is the leading example, so an act improving law enforcement on social networks. It obliges social networks with at least 2 million users in Germany to take down content within 24 hours if it is manifestly illegal, and within 7 days when it's not manifestly but illegal. So they also are now under a reporting duty. Every 6 months they have to report about how they dealt with complaints. And the EU is also taking initiative in the context of the copyright reform, but also in the context of the ongoing Audiovisual Media Services Directive reform. And let's focus for just a little while on this reform. What will be new, and where are we in the stage of the new directive? We the three limbs of the EU legislative power, the Council of Ministers, the European Parliament and the Commission have reached a political agreement on the text in June of this year, meaning that in the fall they will officially adopt the text, and which will be published then in the official journal around December of this year. And member states will have 21 months to transpose the rules. And what is new in the directive is that rules will be or have been adopted for the so-called video sharing platforms. So the video sharing platforms will no longer be able to say, oh, we're not covered by these audiovisual media rules because we don't have editorial responsibility. Now there is a new category adopted in the directive, and rules being adopted specifically for this new category, which we call the video sharing platforms. So who will be covered? Well, those who offer services devoted to providing programs, user-generated videos, or both to the general public in order to inform, entertain, or educate. And the directive recognizes this platform does not have editorial responsibility, but because it determines the organization, including by algorithm or other automatic means, it does have a certain responsibility. Now, does that include social media? There has been a big debate whether Facebook Watch or Facebook Video or the video service of Instagram would have to be covered as well. Well, the EU legislator thinks they should when they fall under the definition of a video sharing platform, meaning an essential functionality of that service should be the delivery of videos or user-generated videos or programs. And programs then refers to video content made by professionals. So in some cases, although the aim of the directive is not to cover or regulate social media as such, when they fall within this definition, they also have to play by the rules that have been set now, and which include the following. Video service providers have to put in place appropriate measures to protect minors from harmful content. Think about pornographic material. And measures to protect the general public from incitement to violence or hatred, or terrorist content, child pornography, etc. And they also have to respect certain obligations for commercial communications that they are responsible for. You may have read in the newspapers that there's often a lot of commotion about this hidden product placement in videos by vloggers where they promote certain brands, but it's not clear for the viewer that actually they have been paid for it. So now there are also platforms will become to some extent responsible for making sure that there's transparency about the presence of advertising in these videos. You may wonder what are appropriate measures. Well, the directive gives some guidance. These measures have to relate to the organization of the content, not the content as such. And hence my title. The platforms will become accountable. They will have a duty to put in place certain systems to deal with inappropriate content, but they don't become liable for the content itself. And it also depends on the size of the platform, the harm it may cause. And so the more harmful the content will be, the more effective the measures will have to be. And they may include flagging and reporting mechanisms, age verification systems, systems to rate the content by uploaders, parental control systems, etc. Now the directive also underlines that these measures shouldn't lead to ex-ante control measures or upload filtering of content, because that would not comply with the e-commerce directive. Video sharing platforms will still qualify as well as information society services, which are covered by this e-commerce directive and which can benefit from this liability shield. And so the EU legislator had to find a delicate balance there between imposing a duty of care, but at the same time not holding these platforms responsible for the content. Now, to increase legal certainty, member states, they will have to establish mechanisms to assess the appropriateness of the measures so that the platforms know we're doing fine. Our system is approved by, for instance, the media regulator. The directive also stimulates co-regulation where the sector and authorities will work together, and member states will have the opportunity or are allowed to adopt stricter rules in comparison with what the directive prescribes, on the condition that they are still in compliance with the e-commerce directive. Okay, what will video sharing platforms have to do in practice? That's the final. Well, in a way, they already experiment with these systems. You may remember the controversy that has arisen over the Innocence of Muslims video, where Google had to act. And it took down the video in a number of countries because it was infringing local laws or because it was politically very sensitive in certain countries, but it continued to show the video in other regions of the world. So tailor-based or tailor-made approaches or responses. Now, we have to realize in some cases platforms may react too late. In this case, the Tidepot challenge, people were invited, I think, to eat these things that you use to clean your dishes, and with disastrous effects. So after some time, the video was taken down by YouTube, but it had already made victims. You may also be confronted with things like this, that if you develop or deploy automated filtering, you will get into situations like this. And basically, some of you may already recognize what this is about. It's a video that was made by the Flemish Musea after Facebook had taken down some of their content showing nude paintings of Rubens, which is a well-known painter in the Low Countries. So you see that if you use algorithms to filter out certain content, these algorithms may not know the context, and they see a breast of a woman, and then they take they flag it as inappropriate, and they take it down, whereas it was actually art. So you will have these situations also where so video sharing platforms or social media are being accused of censoring certain content for political reasons. Yesterday, only the BBC reported about Jack Dorsey having to testify in the Senate in the US and explaining why the algorithms that Twitter uses to lower or rank certain content lower were apparently not always impartial. So where does that bring us? What's the conclusion of all of this? The role of an arbiter of speech is a very tricky one. It's not something we want video sharing platforms to take up fully without leaving sufficient control by courts or independent media authorities. Any reports or studies have shown that a decision that is made to censor certain content will lead to more censorship, that it's like a snowball effect. So we have to make sure we don't go down that slippery slope. But I think analyzing the text that the EU legislator has come up with, they are aware of this, and they have tried to strike a balance between the different interests at stake, which doesn't mean that we should not remain vigilant, and that it's all our responsibility to check regularly these reports that video sharing platforms and other online intermediaries have to publish. For instance, under the German law, they have to explain how they deal with this. Facebook, for instance, has earlier this year published new community guidelines. So it's all our duty to check those. Are these platforms not censoring too much? Is there any content that indeed should be taken down? It's a shared responsibility, and all the technical people here in the room try to come up with good algorithms that filter out content that indeed should be taken down, but leave things that are important for public debate and that are in the interest of democracy, that we should leave them up, even when it's shocking content, because that's what free speech is about. It is to protect speech that might be shocking for certain parts of society, but that can, that are without this fight of opinions, there is no true democracy. That's also what the European Court of Human Rights has repeatedly said in many, many court cases. Thank you for your attention.